right, so moving on, now we have Skylar Presley Gertensen from Valparaiso University, and she's going to be talking about tornado outbreak predictability. How far can we take it?
So good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be able to present my summer research to all of you at the AMS conference. If you don't know who I am, my name is Skylar Gertensen, and I am an undergraduate senior meteorology major at Valparaiso University and an alum of the class of 2022 with the La Penta internship program. My work was done with the Storm Prediction Center, and we looked at tornado outbreak predictability. And as you can see from the title, I like very fun names. So without further ado, we will get into the study. So our study analyzed a period from 2000 to 2019 where we identified 181 tornado outbreaks utilizing a definition created for this project, which I will get into further into the presentation. From these 181 outbreaks, we analyzed their climatology that took a look at their spatial and seasonal distributions. Finally, we assessed the forecast skill of all of our outbreak days utilizing the GEFs and the top 5 and bottom 5 cases of our outbreak days based upon their areal sizes. So first, I will go into our definition of a tornado outbreak for this project. I will then analyze the climatology of all of our outbreaks, and then finally, I will go into our predictability analysis. So our data was gathered from the NOAA Storm Database from 1950 to 2019, which should be available on the Storm Prediction Center's website. We got our 500 millibar reforecast and reanalysis data from the GEFs. For our reforecast data, we utilized 5 ensemble members from the GEFs, valid at 0Z up to 384 hours at 6-hour intervals. And then for our reanalysis data, it was valid at 0Z for 6-hour intervals as well. For our climatological data, we utilized the GEFs reanalysis data that we gathered previously to calculate daily means from 2000 to 2019. So what is a tornado outbreak? I have a feeling if I ask all of you that same question, you will all give me different answers. The most popular answer to that question is that a tornado outbreak is composed of 6 tornadoes or more. But some papers say that a tornado outbreak is a day where 6 or more significant tornadoes occur. There are other factors such as the number of reports, the region that the tornado outbreak occurs in, and the time constraints of the tornado outbreak. So all of these definitions are very broad, and it gives researchers a lot of leeway when it comes to how we define a tornado outbreak. So for this project, we defined a tornado outbreak utilizing the practically perfect hindcast algorithm. So for those of you who are unaware of what the practically perfect hindcast algorithm is, or PPH, it is an algorithm that draws probability contours based on a Gaussian filter that assesses report density and a smoothing filter that defines probability areas. I'm sure my cohort at Valparaiso would know that we have a sand map in our meteorology building, and it is a similar concept to that. If you gather enough sand and gather it into an area, then it will draw a higher height contour interval. It's the same thing with the practically perfect hindcast algorithm. For this example on the slide, I have a very infamous tornado outbreak case, April 27th of 2011, that demonstrates what the practically perfect hindcast does. Our grid of assessment was 80 kilometers with our smoothing filter set to 120 kilometers. This way we matched our grid with SPC's probability requirement, being that an event is likely within 25 miles of a specific point, and it also created the likeliest grid of an SPC probability outlook. But even with the practically perfect hindcast, it was still a very broad list of outbreak days that we had, just considering days where 6 or more tornadoes occurred. Thus, we had to narrow down our definition to get a little bit more finer resolution to narrow down our data. So we utilized the practically perfect hindcast again, but this time we started considering if there was a minimum contour requirement or if there was a minimum severity requirement for our tornadoes. On my slide right now, I have an example of May 10th of 2003 that utilizes 2 outbreak definitions that we utilized for our main outbreak definition. On the left, we have a practically perfect hindcast map of EF2 or greater reports with a maximum contour probability of 15%. On the right side of my screen, I have a EF0 or greater report map with a probability contour of 45%. So overall, our definition was that a tornado outbreak is a convective day where a practically perfect hindcast of 45% or greater exists for all EF0 plus reports, or a practically perfect hindcast of greater 15% exists for all EF2 or greater reports. So now that we had all of our outbreak days and we have our definition now, what's the pattern? So tornado outbreak papers have also discussed the climatology of tornado outbreaks, such as the season of their occurrence and their aerial coverage. So we thought it was important to take a closer look into the patterns that are associated with our tornado outbreaks to see if they correlated with the papers that we used to sort of narrow down our definition of a tornado outbreak. So on this screen, I have a alternating GIF between a 45% and 15%. As we can see, generally, our outbreaks fall to the east of the Mississippi River with an increase in coverage as we go into the EF2 map. This is probably more as a result of damage bias, as east of the Mississippi River, we have more buildings to impact with greater severity in our tornadoes. This next slide shows our number of outbreaks per month. As we can see, there is a prominent bimodal distribution throughout the year, with our greatest area of interest being in the spring and the April and May months. And then in winter, November has the highest number there. So these next two images are going to be the distribution of our outbreak sizes. So our range of outbreak areas has a couple of outliers, as you can see, but there is a large range of size for outbreaks. On average, outbreaks fall below 50,000 square kilometers or fall within 100,000 square kilometers, which, fun fact, is about the same size as South Korea. In this next picture that I'm going to show, we are going to see the outbreak sizes for month, and there is a general correlation with our bimodal distribution that I went over earlier. Average outbreak size varies between all of our months, with some large outbreaks creating outliers in the data, but overall the pattern of most outbreaks falling within these months matches our outbreak numbers from the previous slide. This could be an indicator that we may anticipate larger sized outbreaks in months with greater outbreak numbers. And this final image that I would like to show is a culmination of 500 millibar geopotential height data for all of our outbreak days. All of their heights were gathered and averaged. And we can see that there is a very prominent trough over the central United States, with an area of interest generally being within that eastern region of the United States that I was discussing earlier. This trough is a significant pattern, as if we're taking an average of all of our 500 heights and we're getting a prominent trough over the central United States, that is very indicative that maybe this might be a pattern that would be useful to forecasters when evaluating the likelihood of a tornado outbreak. So now we're going to get into the title of the presentation: what is the predictability? So with all of this, we then wanted to assess the makeup of our outbreak list. We wanted to find the average fall-off time of forecast skill for all of our tornado outbreaks, and we wanted to try and pinpoint an exact day or hour that that might occur. We also wanted to see the overall predictability and whether it was different between larger sized cases and smaller sized cases. So this is a plot created by my mentor, Allison Brannon, that shows the event day average for 500 millibar geopotential heights for our time period. I would like to bring your guys' attention to the y-axis for anomaly correlation coefficients. So for this project, we took a look at anomaly correlation coefficients to evaluate our predictability, as they can give us insight as to whether a forecast is better than climatology or climatology is better than a forecast. My mentor will go further into that in her research, in her presentation after mine. So previous literature found that an ACC value of 0.6 determined our forecast skill. So for the purposes of this presentation, we will say that anything above this dotted line at 0.6 is a skillful forecast, and anything below that line is a no-skill forecast. As we can see from this graph, we can see that our ensemble mean falls generally somewhere around a forecast lead time of 8 days. So then we wanted to take a look at all of our top 5 and bottom 5 cases based upon their area to see if there was greater predictability or not as great predictability. So this is, again, the April 27th, 2011 case, utilizing the guess ensemble members. And for our big case, we can see that our forecast skill falls off at about 264 hours. Whereas for a smaller case, we can see that this falls off at about 168 hours. This is a 96-hour difference, and it's very significant. So overall, for the average skill drop, we could see that it was at 174 hours. For a big case skill drop, on average, it was on 183 hours, and for a small case skill drop, it was at 178 hours. So there are some extra things that we would like to consider in the future that relate to this subject. We want to expand the number of outbreaks for our big and small cases, as bigger and smaller cases are not indicative of, they may catch dramatic outliers. There may be more cases that aren't as dramatic as April 27th, 2011, as we saw previously. Its forecast scale fell off at a lot later of a time than its average. And our forecast scale for an average small case was larger than that of an overall case. So we wanted to take a further look into the forecast scale longevity for smaller cases and see if there was more noise correlated with that, or if we were seeing what we were supposed to be seeing. Also, for future research, we wanted to take a look at more parameters, because 500 millibars is something you take a look at when you're considering a severe weather case. However, it is not the only thing you need to consider when considering severe weather. There are other variables that we could take a look at, and that is something that we would like to continue to look into. So overall, there's no only definition for a tornado outbreak. Our climatology shows a bimodal distribution across months in terms of the number of outbreaks, with our sizes falling mostly within 100,000 square kilometers. Our average 500 millibar heights show a trough in the central United States for outbreaks, which may be important for forecasters when determining the likelihood of a severe weather outbreak or a tornado outbreak, And then for our overall tornado outbreak predictability, our guess forecast scale at 500 millibars falls into no skill at about 7 to 8 days overall, and our larger case areas have a greater longevity in their forecast skill than our smaller case areas. So without saying anything else, here are all of my references, and I am open for questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have time for a question or two. Do we have anything in the audience? All right, do we have anything online? Okay, so I followed your presentation, except when you got to the size, differentiating between the 5 largest and the 5 smallest. Were you talking about the number of tornadoes in those sample sizes, or were you talking about the physical area when you're talking discriminating between sizes?
We were talking more about the physical area.
Okay. All right. And then because anomaly correlation is a continuous statistic, and it's very much dependent on making sure that everything is matched up exactly, grid cell to grid cell and so forth. Do you foresee trying to, when I look at the PPH plots, I immediately think of object-based approaches, method for object-based diagnostics in METPLUS and similar approaches. Do you feel that might be something that you might be able to explore in the future to use objects to quantify the predictability at all, or do you think anomaly correlation is the only measure that will work for this?
I would say at least considering the period from 2000 to 2019, because, considering the relevancy to the current time, I think that maybe anomaly correlation coefficient might be better, and climatology might be better for that. But that is something to look forward to, at least for more current cases, I would say.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We have time for one more. All right, then I guess thank you very much, and we'll move on to the next speaker.
Thank you.